During my years exploring the wild, I've come to understand that nature rarely announces its secrets loudly. More often, they arrive quietly in the pause before a bird takes flight, in the stillness of a predator waiting for the wind to shift, in the way a single raindrop can set off a chain reaction across an entire ecosystem. I've spent decades chasing these quiet moments, and I can tell you, they never stop teaching me something new. There's a particular kind of silence you learn to recognize after enough years in the field, not the absence of life, but life holding its breath. I remember sitting at the edge of a wetland just before dawn, cold coffee in hand, waiting for nothing in particular, and watching an entire world wake up around me one sound at a time. First the insects, then the frogs, then somewhere distant, the low call of something larger moving through the reeds. Nothing dramatic happened that morning, and yet I walked away from it feeling like I'd witnessed something enormous, simply because I'd taken the time to notice the order in which the world chose to reveal itself. One thing I've learned from nature is that survival is rarely about strength alone. I've watched creatures no bigger than my hand outsmart predators 10 times their size, simply by understanding their environment better than anyone else could. I think of the small mammals I've observed in rocky, exposed terrain, animals that have no claws sharp enough and no size large enough to fight off anything that hunts them. And yet they survive, generation after generation, because they know every crevice, every escape route, every shadow that offers cover at exactly the right moment of the day. Survival, I've come to believe, is less about who is strongest and more about who understands their surroundings most intimately. Adaptation isn't just a scientific term you read in textbooks, it's a living, breathing negotiation between an animal and the world it calls home. Every claw, every color pattern, every subtle behavior has been shaped over thousands of generations by trial, error, and sheer persistence. Nothing about an animal's body or behavior is arbitrary. The curve of a beak, the length of a limb, the timing of a molt. Each one is a small, hard-won answer to a question the environment has been asking for millennia. I think often about camouflage, because it's one of those adaptations that never stops amazing me, no matter how many times I encounter it in the field. I've spent long afternoons scanning a patch of bark or leaf litter, certain nothing was there, only to have something shift ever so slightly and reveal itself as a living creature that had been sitting in plain sight the entire time. It's humbling, honestly, to realize how much of the world moves around us undetected simply because it has mastered the art of not being seen. And camouflage isn't only about matching a background. Some animals mimic the shape of a leaf down to its veins and imperfections. Others mimic the pattern of light filtering through a canopy, and still others rely on disruptive coloration, patterns that break up their outline, so a predator's eye simply can't parse where one part of the body ends and another begins. Evolution in these cases hasn't just painted an animal a certain color, it has essentially solved a visual puzzle over millions of years, refining it until the deception became nearly perfect. I've often witnessed the delicate choreography between predator and prey, and it always humbles me. It's easy to see this relationship as brutal, but out there in the middle of it, you realize it's something closer to balance. I remember watching a chase unfold across open terrain once, and what struck me wasn't the speed or the outcome, but the sheer commitment on both sides. The predator wasn't cruel, and the prey wasn't merely a victim. Both were simply doing what millions of years of evolution had prepared them to do, each one playing a role that kept the other honest, fast, alert, and strong. Predators aren't villains, and prey aren't victims. They're partners in an ancient dance that keeps ecosystems healthy. Without that tension, forests would grow overcrowded, grasslands would lose their diversity, and rivers would silence the very songs they've sung for centuries. This is something I try to explain to people who ask why we don't simply protect prey animals from predators altogether, as if kindness meant removing all danger. But nature doesn't work that way, and thank goodness it doesn't. When predators disappear from a landscape, the effects ripple outward in ways that are often invisible until it's too late. Herbivore populations grow unchecked, vegetation gets stripped bare, soil erodes without root systems to hold it together, and smaller species that depended on that vegetation begin to vanish too. I've seen firsthand what happens to a landscape when a single major predator disappears from it, rivers changing course because the plants that once held the banks together were gone. birds disappearing because the shrubs they nested in had been overgrazed into nothing. It's a sobering lesson in how interconnected everything truly is. Remove one piece, even one that seems frightening or expendable, and the whole system can begin to unravel in ways nobody predicted. What fascinates me most is how intelligent the animal world truly is, in ways we're only beginning to understand. I've seen elephants pause at the bones of their ancestors, birds solve problems that would challenge a young child, and octopuses navigate mazes with a curiosity that mirrors our own. I remember watching a group of elephants slow their pace and gather quietly around the remains of another elephant, touching the bones gently with their trunks, lingering there far longer than seemed necessary for any practical reason. Scientists still debate exactly what this behavior means, but having witnessed it myself, I find it hard not to call it something like grief, or at the very least, recognition. Intelligence in nature doesn't always look like ours, and that's the beauty of it. Some animals think in scent, others in vibration, others in patterns of light we can barely perceive. I've watched birds use tools they fashion themselves from twigs, bending and shaping them to extract insects from tight spaces, solving a problem entirely on their own terms. I've watched fish that appear to recognize individual human divers after repeated encounters, behaving differently around familiar faces than unfamiliar ones. Who's to say our way of understanding the world is the only valid one? I think the more time you spend observing animals closely, the more you start to realize that intelligence is not a single ladder with humans at the top. It's more like a wide, branching tree, with different species developing remarkable cognitive abilities suited entirely to their own way of living. Communication is another thing that continues to astonish me. I've listened to whale calls that seem to travel for what felt like impossible distances underwater, carrying information between individuals separated by miles of open ocean. I've watched prairie dogs use what researchers believe may be one of the most sophisticated alarm call systems known in the animal kingdom, with different calls seemingly describing not just the presence of a predator, but its size, its speed, even the color of its fur. Whether or not we fully understand the depth of what's being communicated, it's clear that animals are constantly exchanging information in ways far more complex than simple noise. Some species use chemical signals left behind on trails, invisible messages that tell others where they've been, what condition they were in, even how long ago they passed through. Others use posture and movement, an entire vocabulary written in the angle of ears, the position of a tail, the way a body tenses or relaxes. I've spent so many hours simply watching these silent conversations unfold that I sometimes forget how strange it must sound to someone who has never had the patience to notice them. Seasons have taught me patience. I've watched deserts bloom overnight after a single storm, transforming barren land into a tapestry of color that vanishes just as quickly as it appeared. I remember standing in a landscape that had looked utterly lifeless for months, dry and cracked and seemingly abandoned by anything green, only to return after a single significant rainfall and find it unrecognizable, wildflowers stretching to the horizon, insects suddenly abundant, birds arriving from who knows where to take advantage of the brief abundance. It never fails to remind me how much dormant life exists just beneath the surface of what looks, at first glance, like nothing at all. Seeds that had waited years, sometimes decades, for exactly the right combination of moisture and temperature finally getting their moment. I've seen mountains shift from snow-capped silence to roaring rivers of meltwater, carrying life down into valleys that depend entirely on that seasonal rhythm. I've stood at the base of peaks in early spring and listened to the sound of ice cracking somewhere far above, the first sign that the mountain was beginning its slow release of the water that entire ecosystems downstream had been waiting for all winter. Nature doesn't rush, yet everything happens exactly when it needs to. I think about migration in this same light, animals traveling thousands of miles guided by cues we still don't fully understand, whether it's the angle of the sun, the pull of the Earth's magnetic field, or some combination of senses layered together in ways that defy simple explanation. I've watched birds arrive at the exact same patch of coastline year after year, generation after generation, as though the location itself had been passed down like an inherited memory. Isn't that a lesson in itself? How often do we try to force outcomes before their time? I think about this often in my own life, how eager we are as people to rush a process, to demand an answer before the conditions are right, when nature seems perfectly content to wait for exactly the right moment, no matter how long that takes. Biodiversity, I've realized, isn't just about variety, it's about resilience. Every species, no matter how small, plays a role in holding the web of life together. I think about the small, often overlooked creatures that rarely make it into documentaries at all, the fungi breaking down fallen wood and returning nutrients to the soil, the insects pollinating plants that